You know what hurts more than physical pain? It's when the person you raised from childhood, the one you sacrificed everything for, looks you in the eye and tells you that someone else deserves happiness more than you do. That your suffering doesn't matter because it's not convenient for them. That's what betrayal really feels like. Not a knife in the back, but a slow, deliberate suffocation of your worth as a human being. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. My name is Marie Cheng and I'm 55 years old. I live in a small condominium in Oakland, California, where the fog rolls in through single-pane windows and the neighbors' music echoes through thin walls. This isn't where I thought I'd be at this stage of my life. 15 years ago, I owned a beautiful house in the suburbs with a garden where I grew vegetables and flowers. I had a husband who adored me, a stepson I cherished as my own, and dreams of grandchildren learning to read in that same garden. But life has a way of stripping you down to nothing, piece by piece, until you're left staring at the skeleton of who you used to be. My husband David died of a massive heart attack when Jason was 19. The sudden medical expenses and funeral costs ate through our modest savings like fire through paper. I sold the house, downsized, worked extra tutoring jobs after my teaching day just to keep Jason in college and then business school. I told myself it was temporary, that once he graduated, got established, maybe got married, we'd rebuild what we lost together. That was my first mistake, believing that devotion creates loyalty instead of entitlement. Jason did extraordinarily well for himself economics degree, then an MBA from Harvard, then a position at a prestigious investment bank on Wall Street. He bought a luxury condominium in Manhattan, one of those glass towers that sparkles like a jewel but costs $4 million. He married Emily, a marketing director whose family owns a real estate empire across 3 states. They had the kind of wedding that gets featured in society magazines, where the champagne alone cost more than I made in 8 months. I was proud of him. Even when the visits became phone calls and the phone calls became texts and the texts became awkward interactions on holidays, I told myself this was normal. This was what happened when children grew up and became successful. They didn't need their stepmother cluttering up their pristine lives with reminders of struggle and modest beginnings. But I needed him. God, how I needed him. It started with my knees 3 years ago. A dull ache that I ignored because I couldn't afford to acknowledge it. Teaching meant long hours on my feet and health insurance that covered the bare minimum. The ache became pain, the pain became agony, and the agony became a constant companion that followed me through every waking moment. I went to the community health center first, then to a specialist who told me I needed knee replacement surgery. Both knees, actually, and that without it I'd be using a wheelchair within 2 years. The surgery would cost $40,000. My insurance would cover 60% eventually, after a lengthy approval process that could take up to 18 months. In the meantime, I could manage with pain medication and physical therapy. Manage? As if managing was living. I called Jason that night. It was the first time I'd asked him for help since he graduated business school. "Marie, $40,000 is a lot of money," he said. And I could hear Emily's voice in the background. "Something about dinner reservations. And honestly, you're being a little dramatic. People live with knee pain all the time. Have you tried swimming?" Swimming, while I could barely stand long enough to prepare a simple meal. "Jason, I can barely walk. I had to take unpaid leave from work because I can't. Look, Marie, I know it's hard, but Emily and I have our own financial obligations right now. We're looking at maybe buying a place in the Hamptons. And with the market the way it is, a place in the Hamptons, while his stepmother was dissolving prescription painkillers in her morning coffee just to make it through the day. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. On Friday, I saw the posts on Emily's lifestyle blog. Her mother, Victoria, glowing in an exclusive Beverly Hills wellness clinic, showing off her rejuvenated appearance. The caption read, "Thanks to my incredible son-in-law for making this anti-aging dream come true. Feeling 20 years younger. Blessed family knew me." I stared at that screen for 20 minutes. Victoria Wong, 48 years old, lifestyle influencer, country club member, owner of multiple properties and a successful blog, getting $25,000 worth of cutting-edge beauty treatments courtesy of my stepson. The same stepson who told me that people live with knee pain all the time. I called him immediately. "Jason, I saw Victoria's post." Silence. Then, "Marie, that's different." "Different how?" "She's been really struggling with her confidence since the business challenges. She deserves to feel good about herself. And I don't deserve to walk. Marie, you're being unfair. It's not the same thing at all. But it was exactly the same thing. It was about priorities. It was about who mattered and who didn't. It was about the fact that my stepson had $25,000 to spend on making his mother-in-law feel beautiful, but not a penny to help his own stepmother walk without screaming. I hung up the phone and sat in my small kitchen, looking out at the courtyard where broken concrete glittered like cruel diamonds. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking about the pain in my knees. I was thinking about something much sharper, much cleaner. I was thinking about what my stepson had just taught me about family loyalty, about how love was conditional, about how sacrifice was forgotten the moment it became inconvenient. And I was thinking about what I was going to do with that lesson. The next morning, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. The fog of pain medication and self-pity had lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp focus that cut through everything like a blade. I made coffee, real coffee, not the instant powder I'd been drinking to save money, and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote what I know about my stepson. Jason loved his image. Everything about his life was curated for maximum impression: the apartment, the car, the wife, the social media presence that showed him at charity galas and financial conferences. He'd built his identity around being successful, generous, and family-oriented. The kind of man who posted Father's Day tributes to his dead father and Mother's Day messages about how I was his inspiration. All lies, of course, but lies that his friends, colleagues, and social circle believed completely. I understood something that morning that I'd been too hurt and desperate to see before. My stepson's greatest fear wasn't losing money, or even losing Emily. It was losing the story he told about himself. The story where he was the hero, the grateful stepson, the man who'd risen above his humble beginnings to become someone important. What would happen to that story if people knew the truth? I spent the morning making phone calls, not to ask for help. I was done begging, but to gather information. I called Jason's old college friends, his colleagues, people who knew him from the exclusive club where he and Emily played tennis. Casual conversations, catching up, asking about their families, their lives. "Oh, Marie, we see Jason all the time at the foundation events," said Jennifer Walsh, whose husband worked at the same firm. "He's always talking about you, how proud he is of how strong you are. He said you were handling your health issues like a champion." Handling my health issues like a champion. While I was rationing pain pills and walking with a cane I'd bought at a thrift store. "He mentioned you were considering some kind of surgery," Jennifer continued, "but that you were being really brave about waiting for the right time." The right time? As if there was ever a right time to live in agony. Every conversation was the same. Jason had been telling people that I was fine, that I was toughing it out, that I was too proud to accept help. He'd painted himself as the concerned stepson with the stubborn stepmother who refused to let him contribute to her medical expenses. More lies, but effective ones. By noon, I had a complete picture of my stepson's social and professional network. I knew who respected him, who envied him, who would be most interested in knowing the truth about his character. I also knew exactly how much his reputation was worth to him: everything. I spent the afternoon documenting everything. Screenshots of Emily's blog posts showing their lavish lifestyle. Photos of Victoria's beauty treatment recovery, where she thanked her amazing son-in-law repeatedly. Bank records showing my own financial struggles. Medical bills I couldn't pay. The letter from the surgeon explaining why I needed the surgery urgently. I also wrote down every conversation I'd had with Jason over the past 2 years. Every time he'd brushed off my concerns. Every excuse he'd made, every time he'd changed the subject when I mentioned my pain. I had a perfect memory for humiliation. But I wasn't ready to act yet. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. That piece came 3 days later in the form of my neighbor, Linda Martinez. Linda was 59, widowed, and had been living in the unit next to mine for 5 years. She was one of those women who'd raised 3 children while working full-time, had recently become a grandmother, and had opinions about everything from local politics to the proper way to organize a spice rack. She was also the only person who'd noticed that I was struggling. "Marie, honey, you look terrible," she said, standing in my doorway with a casserole dish. "And don't tell me you're fine, because I can hear you crying through these thin walls." I let her in because I was tired of being alone with my anger. She sat at my kitchen table, looked around at the pill bottles and medical bills scattered across the counter, and asked the question no one else had bothered to ask. What do you need? I told her everything. Not the sanitized version I'd been giving people, but the truth. The pain that woke me up every night. The fact that I'd lost my job because I could no longer do it. The humiliation of asking my successful stepson for help and being told that his mother-in-law's vanity was more important than my mobility. Linda listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know what pisses me off most about this? She finally said. It's not that your stepson is selfish. Lots of kids are selfish. It's that he's a coward. He could have just said he didn't want to help you, but instead he's out there lying about it, making himself look good while you suffer. She was right. The selfishness I could have forgiven eventually, but the lies, the way he'd stolen my narrative and twisted it to make himself the victim of my stubbornness, that was unforgivable. What are you going to do about it? Linda asked. I don't know yet, but I was lying. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just wasn't sure I was ready to burn every bridge to do it. Linda made the decision for me. I'm starting a crowdfunding campaign, she announced that night. And I'm going to tell the truth about what's happening here. Linda, no. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're protecting a stepson who wouldn't lift a finger to help you. That stops now. She was already pulling out her phone, typing rapidly. What's your stepson's full name and his wife's? I want to make sure people know exactly who we're talking about. I could have stopped her. Should have stopped her. But as I watched her fingers moving across the screen, creating the post that would change everything, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years' anticipation. Marie Cheng is a 55-year-old former elementary school teacher who raised her stepson from age 12 after his father married her. Linda typed, reading aloud as she wrote. She worked extra jobs to pay for his education and her husband's heart treatment. Now she needs knee replacement surgery and can't afford it, while her stepson, Jason Chen of Manhattan, just paid for his mother-in-law's luxury beauty treatments. Share this story. Help us show Marie that real family isn't about blood. It's about showing up when it matters. She attached photos I'd shown her me with my cane, struggling to get up from a chair, the medical bills scattered across my table, and then, because Linda was nothing if not thorough, screenshots from Emily's blog showing their wealth. Linda, this will destroy him. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty to have patience for its hypocrisies. Good. Some people need to be destroyed. Maybe that's the only way they learn what matters. She hit publish before I could say another word. Within an hour, the post had 50 shares. Within 6 hours, it had 500. By the next morning, it had gone viral in the way that only stories about family betrayal can go viral, shared by angry parents, disappointed children, and everyone who'd ever felt abandoned by someone they'd sacrificed for. The donations started small, $5, $10 to $20, but they kept coming. Strangers who saw their own stories reflected in mine. People who understood what it meant to be discarded after a lifetime of giving. More importantly, the comments started coming, and every single one of them mentioned Jason by name. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Jason, of course, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear his voice yet. I wanted to watch the fire spread first, wanted to see how much of his carefully constructed image would survive the heat. I had my answer by evening. The crowdfunding campaign had raised $12,000 in less than 24 hours. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching my stepson's reputation burn down around him, one share at a time. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the orthopedic surgeon who'd been waiting 18 months for my insurance approval, suddenly had an opening when the campaign hit $35,000. Funny how money made medical miracles possible. Mrs. Cheng, I have to ask, she said during our pre-op consultation. The media attention around your case. Are you comfortable with that level of exposure? I was more than comfortable. I was thriving. The story had grown legs, as they say. Local news stations picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national blogs that specialized in family drama and social justice. The comment section of every article was a battleground between people defending Jason. We don't know the whole story. And people calling for his head. What kind of monster abandons his stepmother? But the most devastating coverage came from an unexpected source, Jason's own professional network. Someone had leaked information about his financial situation to a Wall Street blog. Suddenly, everyone knew exactly how much money Jason Chen made, how much his apartment was worth, how much he'd spent on Victoria's treatments. The numbers were stark, undeniable, and utterly damning. Investment bank executives started distancing themselves from him publicly. The charity board he served on quietly asked him to step down. His company, facing pressure from employees who were sharing the story internally, suggested he take a leave of absence until the situation resolved itself. Jason called me 47 times in 3 days. I answered on the 48th call. Marie, please. You have to make this stop. His voice was different, smaller, desperate. The confident Wall Street executive was gone, replaced by a frightened boy who'd finally realized that actions had consequences. Stop what, Jason? The posts, the interviews, all of it. People are calling me a monster. They're saying I hate my own stepmother. Don't you? Silence. Then Marie, that's not. I never meant. You paid $25,000 for Victoria's beauty treatments while I was living on oatmeal and generic pain pills. What would you call that? It wasn't like that. You're making it sound. I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm telling people exactly what happened. If you don't like how it sounds, maybe you should have thought about that before you did it. Marie, please. Emily's family is furious. Her father is threatening to pull his investment from our fund. My career is... I hung up. Let me be clear about something I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no maternal instinct to protect the child I'd raised. Those feelings had died the day Jason chose Victoria's Vanity over my ability to walk. What remained was a cold satisfaction, watching him learn what abandonment felt like. The surgery went perfectly. Bilateral knee replacement, 6 hours under anesthesia, and when I woke up, I was surrounded by flowers and cards from strangers who'd followed my story. Linda was there, of course, along with 3 other neighbors I barely knew, but who'd been quietly watching out for me for months. Jason was not there. Neither was Emily. Not that I'd expected them, but Robert Kim was there. I met Robert in the rehabilitation center 2 weeks after surgery. He was 68, a retired carpenter who'd suffered a stroke 8 months earlier that left him with limited mobility on his right side. He had thick silver hair, gentle eyes, and hands that still bore the calluses of a man who'd built things his entire life. You're the lady from the news, he said the first day I saw him struggling with his physical therapy exercises. I'm the lady who got tired of being treated like garbage by her family, I corrected. He laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite kind people gave when they didn't know what else to do. Good for you. My daughters keep asking if I saw your story. They're worried I'm going to start a crowdfunding campaign if they don't visit me enough. Are they good to you? They're the best daughters a man could ask for. Lost their mother 2 years ago, and they've been taking care of their old man ever since. Sometimes I think they care too much. I couldn't imagine what that felt like. Robert and I became friends gradually, the way lonely people do when they recognize something familiar in each other's faces. Not the loneliness his daughters visited constantly, but the understanding that life could change everything in an instant, that the body you'd trusted for decades could betray you, leaving you dependent on others in ways you'd never imagined. The difference was that Robert's others had shown up. Mine had not. What are you going to do when you get out of here? He asked one afternoon as we worked on our exercises side by side. I don't know. Go back to my condo, I guess. Try to find work that doesn't require standing all day. That sounds lonely. It was lonely, but lonely was better than being disappointed by people who were supposed to love you. What about you? My daughters want me to move in with one of them. Grace has got a guest suite, and Amy's got a small apartment above her garage. They're fighting over who gets to take care of me. He shook his head with fond exasperation. Good problems to have, I suppose. Good problems. I tried to remember what those felt like. 3 months into rehabilitation, Robert introduced me to his daughters. Grace was 43, a pharmacist with 2 teenage sons and a husband who coached soccer. Amy was 40, an accountant with 3 young children and a husband who owned a small landscaping business. They were the kind of women who brought homemade soup to their father's therapy sessions and argued about whose turn it was to drive him to appointments. They welcomed me into their family orbit without question or judgment. Grace brought me tea when I had a cold. Amy's youngest son made me a drawing of flowers that I taped to my bathroom mirror. They included me in birthday celebrations and holiday plans as if I'd always been there. It was what family was supposed to feel like. Meanwhile, my real family was imploding spectacularly. The crowdfunding campaign had raised $48,000 by the time I finished rehabilitation. The excess money went to other people in similar situations. Elderly parents abandoned by successful children. Families facing medical bankruptcies. people whose own children had forgotten what sacrifice looked like. I made sure every donation was publicized. Every recipient was interviewed. Every story was tied back to the original narrative about Jason and his priorities. The gift that kept on giving. Jason's life was unraveling with surgical precision. The investment fund he'd joined collapsed when Victoria's family withdrew their backing. His and Emily's apartment went on the market, though at their price point in Manhattan it wasn't moving quickly. Emily had moved back in with her parents, the same parents whose finances Jason had prioritized over his stepmother's health. Victoria, meanwhile, had become a social media pariah. Her blog posts about her amazing son-in-law had been screenshotted and shared thousands of times, usually with comments about her selfishness and vanity. She'd made her accounts private, then deleted them entirely when people started showing up at her country club to confront her. The irony was delicious. Victoria had gotten her beauty treatments to feel better about herself. But now she couldn't show her face anywhere without being recognized as the woman whose vanity had cost a stepson his stepmother. On the evening of my final rehabilitation session, as I walked unassisted to the parking lot for the first time in 3 years, Robert caught up with me. "Marie, wait." I turned and he was standing there with a small velvet box in his hands. "I know this might seem fast, and I know you've got every reason not to trust family anymore, but..." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Would you consider being part of mine?" I looked at this kind man who'd watched me rebuild myself from nothing, who'd introduced me to daughters who treated me better than my own stepson ever had, who was offering me something I'd thought was lost forever, a place where I belonged. "Robert, You don't have to answer now, but Grace and Amy, they love you already. The grandkids ask about you every day. We're not perfect, but we show up for each other. Always." I thought about Jason, probably sitting in his empty apartment, wondering how his perfect life had crumbled so completely. I thought about Emily learning that money and status were meaningless when your husband's reputation was destroyed. I thought about Victoria, hiding from the consequences of her selfishness. Then I looked at Robert, at his hopeful face and calloused hands, at the family who'd embraced me without expecting anything in return. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I want to be part of your family." And for the first time in years, I smiled without calculating the cost. The dinner to celebrate Robert's recovery was held at Grace's house on a Saturday evening in October. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, and Grace's backyard was strung with warm white lights that cast everything in a golden glow. I wore a new dress, navy blue with small flowers, bought with money I'd earned from my own choices rather than begged for from ungrateful stepchildren. My hair was styled, my nails were done, and for the first time in years, I felt like a woman rather than a burden. Robert's family had prepared a feast. Grace's husband, Mike, grilled steaks and salmon, while Amy made her famous garlic mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables. The grandchildren, ranging from 5 to 17, set the table with the kind of chaotic enthusiasm that only came from kids who felt completely secure in their family's love. "Marie, you sit here," announced Amy's youngest, Lily, patting the chair next to hers. "I made you a special place card." It was a piece of construction paper folded in half with Marie, almost grandma, written in purple crayon and decorated with stick figures holding hands. Almost grandma. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. Jason had never given me grandchildren. He and Emily had been waiting for the right time for 8 years, which I now understood meant they'd never wanted children at all. Too messy, too expensive, too disruptive to their carefully curated lifestyle. But here I was, surrounded by children who'd already claimed me as family, who fought over who got to sit next to me at dinner and show me their latest art projects. "Speech! Speech!" called out Amy's oldest, Jake, as we raised our glasses of wine and sparkling cider. Robert stood, his right hand still showing slight tremors from the stroke, but his voice steady and strong. "A year ago, I thought my story was ending. I couldn't move half my body, couldn't remember simple words, couldn't see how I'd ever be the man my family needed me to be." He looked around the table at his daughters, his sons-in-law, his grandchildren, all listening with the kind of attention that only came from genuine love. But this family, my family, they didn't let me give up. They showed up every day, even when I was difficult, even when I was scared, even when I pushed them away because I was embarrassed about needing help. His eyes found mine across the table, and then I met someone else who was fighting her own battles. Someone who'd been abandoned by the people who should have shown up for her. Someone who taught me that family isn't just about who you're born to, it's about who chooses to stay. The tears came then, unexpected and unwelcome. I'd spent months building walls around my emotions, constructing barriers of cold anger and calculated revenge. But sitting in that backyard, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love me without conditions or expectations, the walls cracked. "Marie," Robert continued, "you've shown me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that never bends, but the kind that breaks and rebuilds itself stronger. You've survived betrayal that would have destroyed lesser people, and somehow you've kept your heart open enough to let us love you." He moved around the table toward me, that small velvet box appearing in his hands again. "So I'm asking again, in front of all the people who matter most to me. Marie Cheng, will you marry me? Will you let us be your family for real?" The children were bouncing in their seats with excitement. Grace was crying openly. Amy was recording everything on her phone. Mike was grinning like he'd known this was coming all along. I looked at these faces. These people who'd embraced me completely and made my choice. "Yes," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I want to be part of this family." The ring slid onto my finger perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The children cheered, the adults applauded, and for a moment I forgot about Jason entirely. But only for a moment. My phone buzzed during dessert. A text from an unknown number. "Marie, it's me. I got a new phone. Please, we need to talk. Everything is falling apart." I showed the message to Robert, who read it with the same expression he might use to examine a particularly unpleasant insect. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing left to say." But that wasn't entirely true. There was one more thing I wanted Jason to understand. Later that evening, after the celebration had wound down and Robert had driven me back to my condo, I was moving in with him the following week. I sat down at my computer and typed a response to my stepson's desperate text. "Jason, you're right that everything is falling apart. Your career, your marriage, your reputation, all of it built on the lie that you're a good man. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't happening to you. This is happening because of you. Every consequence you're facing is the direct result of your own choices. You chose Victoria's vanity over my pain. You chose your image over my reality. You chose comfort over character. Now you're learning what those choices cost." I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old Marie, the one who'd spent decades making excuses for her stepson's selfishness, wanted to soften the blow. But that Marie was dead, buried under years of neglect and betrayal. I'm getting married next month to a man who understands what family actually means. His daughters have shown me more love in 6 months than you've shown me in 6 years. His grandchildren call me Grandma Marie and fight over who gets to help me in the garden. I have found my real family and you're not part of it. Don't contact me again. I have nothing more to say to you. And you've proven you have nothing to offer me. Live with your choices, Jason. I'm finally living with mine. I attached a photo from the evening, all of us around the dinner table, laughing and happy, my engagement ring clearly visible as I raised my glass in a toast. I hit send before I could change my mind. My phone rang within minutes. Jason, of course. I declined the call and blocked the number. Then I called Linda to tell her the news about my engagement. "It's about damn time," she said. "When's the wedding?" "Next month. Small ceremony, just family." "Good. Your real family." Real family. The phrase that had once cut so deeply now felt like a badge of honor. Over the following weeks, as I prepared to move in with Robert and plan our simple wedding, the reports about Jason's downfall continued to trickle in through the grapevine of neighbors and social media connections. Emily had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the truth. Her family's money came with strings, and those strings didn't include supporting a husband whose reputation was in ruins. Victoria, it turned out, had been the one pushing hardest for the separation, telling her daughter that she deserved better than a failed man who can't even take care of his own stepmother. The irony was perfect. Victoria, whose beauty treatments had started this entire cascade of consequences, was now the one demanding that Emily abandon Jason in his time of need. The woman who'd benefited from his misplaced priorities was the first to throw him away when those priorities cost him everything. Jason had moved into a studio apartment in Queens, a 45-minute commute from his old life in Manhattan. He'd found work as a contractor for a small financial consulting firm, making a fraction of his previous salary. The apartment hadn't sold, and the mortgage payments were eating through what remained of his savings. I felt nothing hearing these updates. No satisfaction, no guilt, no urge to reach out and offer comfort. Jason had made his choices, and now he was living with them. Exactly the way I'd lived with the consequences of trusting him to be the stepson I'd raised him to be. The difference was that I'd found people who actually deserved my trust. People who showed up, who stayed, who understood that love was demonstrated through action rather than declared through empty words. 3 days before my wedding, I received one final message from Jason. Not a text this time, but a handwritten letter delivered to my old condo building, forwarded by the postal service to Robert's address. Robert brought it to me without comment, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Do you want me to stay while you read it?" he asked. "No," I said. "This is something I need to finish alone." But I was wrong about that too. I opened Jason's letter in Robert's kitchen, standing by the window that overlooked the garden where I'd soon be planting roses. The handwriting was shakier than I remembered, desperate in its urgency. "Marie, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm begging you to read this. I've lost everything. Emily is gone. The apartment is gone. My career is destroyed. I'm living in a studio apartment and working for people who used to be my subordinates. Everyone I thought was my friend has turned their back on me. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I never meant for any of this to happen. I was trying to keep everyone happy, trying to balance everything, and I made the wrong choices. I see that now. Marie, you're all I have left. I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But please don't abandon me the way I abandoned you. You raised me. That has to count for something. I heard you're getting married. I'm happy for you, truly I am. But it doesn't change the fact that you're the closest thing to a mother I ever had. We can work through this. We can fix this. Please call me. Please give me one chance to make this right. I love you. Jason." I read it twice, waiting for some flicker of the maternal instinct that had driven me to sacrifice everything for this man, waiting for the urge to protect him, to forgive him, to offer him the comfort he was begging for. Nothing came. Instead, I felt the same cold clarity that had sustained me through months of watching his world crumble. Jason was still lying even to himself. He hadn't made mistakes. He'd made deliberate choices that revealed his true character. He wasn't sorry for hurting me. He was sorry for the consequences of hurting me. And most telling of all, he was still trying to manipulate me with family ties and guilt. Still expecting me to save him from the mess he'd created. Still believing that having raised him entitled him to forgiveness he hadn't earned. I folded the letter and walked to Robert's fireplace. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening until nothing remained but ash. When Robert found me there an hour later, staring into the dying flames, he didn't ask what the letter had said. He simply sat beside me and took my hand. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfect," I said and meant it. The wedding took place the following Saturday in Grace's backyard, the same place where Robert had proposed. It was everything Jason's expensive, magazine-worthy wedding to Emily hadn't been intimate, genuine, and filled with people who actually cared about the couple getting married. I wore a simple cream-coloured dress and carried a bouquet of roses from Robert's garden. Grace and Amy served as my matrons of honour, while the grandchildren acted as flower girls and ring-bearers with varying degrees of success. The youngest 3-year-old Amy threw her petals with such enthusiasm that she emptied her basket before reaching the altar, then turned to the guests and announced, "I throwed all the flowers." Everyone laughed, including me. When was the last time I'd laughed at a wedding? At my own stepson's ceremony, I'd spent the entire day feeling like an outsider, watching Jason perform the role of happy groom while treating me like an embarrassing relic from his past. Here I was the center of attention in the best possible way. Every speech mentioned how lucky Robert was to have found me, how I'd brought joy back into his life, how our love story proved that it was never too late for a new beginning. "To Marie and Robert," said Mike, raising his glass for the final toast of the evening, "for showing us that family isn't just about who you start with. It's about who you choose to finish with." Choose to finish with. The words echoed in my mind as I looked around at these faces. These people who'd chosen me as surely as I'd chosen them. After the ceremony, as we cleaned up the backyard and prepared for Robert and me to leave for our honeymoon in Napa Valley, Grace pulled me aside. "Marie, I want you to know something. Dad hasn't been this happy since before Mom got sick. You saved him in ways you probably don't even realize." "He saved me too," I said. I know. That's what makes this so beautiful. We were interrupted by Amy's oldest son, who came running up with his phone in his hand. Grandma Marie, someone's been trying to call you all day. The phone keeps buzzing in your purse. I'd forgotten about my phone entirely, caught up in the joy of the day. When I checked it, I found 17 missed calls from Jason's blocked number and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails told the story. Jason had gotten more desperate as the day wore on, calling from friends' phones when he realized I'd blocked him, leaving increasingly frantic messages. Marie, please, I saw the wedding photos on Facebook. You look beautiful, and I'm happy for you, but I need to talk to you. Marie, it's me again. I know you're busy with your wedding, but I'm in real trouble here. Emily's lawyers are taking everything. I might lose my apartment. Marie, please just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain everything. I know I can make you understand. The final message, left just an hour earlier, was different. His voice was flat, emotionless, defeated. I get it now, Marie. You're never going to forgive me. You've got your new family, and I'm not part of it. I just want you to know that I realize what I lost. Not just your money or your help, but you. I lost my stepmother, and it's my fault. I hope you're happy with your new life. I really do. Goodbye. I saved the message not out of sentiment, but as evidence. Evidence that Jason finally understood the cost of his choices. That the consequences had reached their intended target. That justice had been served completely. Robert appeared at my elbow. Everything all right? Everything's perfect, I said, deleting the missed call notifications. Just some spam calls. We left for Napa the next morning. Robert driving while I watched the California landscape roll past the windows. Somewhere behind us, Jason was probably sitting in his studio apartment, finally understanding what it felt like to be abandoned by the person who was supposed to love you unconditionally. I felt no urge to call him back, no maternal instinct to comfort him in his despair. Those feelings had died the day he chose Victoria's beauty treatments over my knee surgery. What remained was the satisfaction of an equation balanced, a debt paid in full. 3 months later, I heard through Linda that Jason had moved to Portland, taking a job with a startup that specialized in something called reputation management. The irony was perfect. A man who'd destroyed his own reputation now helped others salvage theirs. I also heard that Emily had married a hedge fund manager she'd met at a charity auction, someone wealthy enough to satisfy Victoria's requirements for a son-in-law. The wedding photos showed Victoria prominently featured, her surgically enhanced face beaming as she posed with her new, adequately rich son-in-law. Some people never learn, but that wasn't my problem anymore. So that's my story, the story of how I learned that devotion doesn't guarantee loyalty, that sacrifice doesn't create gratitude, and that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop trying to save people who don't want to be saved. Jason made his choices, and I made mine. He chose image over substance, comfort over character, convenience over compassion. I chose to stop enabling him, stop protecting him from consequences, stop pretending that his selfishness was somehow my fault. Did I destroy my stepson's life? No. I simply stopped hiding the truth about who he really was. I stopped being complicit in his lies. Stopped allowing him to use me as a prop in his performance of being a good man. The world did the rest. I'm 70 now, living in a house filled with laughter and grandchildren who call me every day just to say hello. Robert and I tend our garden together, travel when we feel like it, and fall asleep every night knowing we're surrounded by people who would show up for us no matter what. Jason is 40, alone, and finally learning what I knew all along. That love isn't something you deserve simply by existing. It's something you earn through your actions, your choices, your willingness to sacrifice for others the way they've sacrificed for you. Some lessons come too late to matter. His did, and I sleep just fine with that.